Thank you, Koyen. Thank you, Rabbi Rosenfeld. Okay, I'm going to have to apologize in advance that probably being due to the amount of subjects that we have to cover, there won't be time, and it will also be disorienting to have questions in the middle. So if anybody wants to write down or take notes, whatever, if you don't have a paper and pen, take notes on your phone. Any questions you can ask afterwards, but it's probably the best way to go about it. Okay. Okay, so before diving straight into the topic of halachas, just a few divrei psicha, something connected to our parsha, the opening of our parsha. Achrei moi shnei bnei Aaron. So the Gemara makes a connection between the beginning of our parsha and the end of Parshas Metzora. So at the end of Parshas Metzora, which speaks about all these halachas, where many of the halachas are found, benegeh to Nida and Zava. So it says, "V'yizartem es bnei Yisrael," that you should warn the Yidden to be extra careful. Which from this, the Gemara learns. The Gemara also on the daf over there in Shavuos, the Gemara learns that this is where we learn vestes from. That this is where we learn that not just you have to be poirish bizman nidasa, but you also have to be poirish bizman vesta. That's the zartem b'nei Yisrael. It's an extra precaution. Anyway, so the Gemara then is darshaning a lot of drashas about the importance of keeping vestes, and one of the drashas is negayah to also the first pasuk, the smuchin, the first pasuk in our parsha, that our parsha speaks about Achrei moi shnei bnei Aaron. So the Gemara has a JRCC word, a very difficult language, and the Gemara says that these two psukim next to each other teaches that if chas v'shalom one is not careful, not about nida, but even about vesas, which is just a siyag, right? It's a siyag, it's a machlokes, whether it's a siyag min haTorah or midrabanan. But if somebody's not careful with vestes, so even if he would have children like Bnei Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, B'kravei HaKadosh, even if he would have such children, Rahman al-Islam could be a matzav of Achrei Mois. Right, so the Gemara has a very harsh word. The Medrash has more positive words. And the Medrash says that this teaches us that in the schus of being zahir, extra careful in Taharas Hamishpacha, so then we're zoiche to have children like Bnei Aaron, and doesn't finish off with the negative, right? So anyway, so we see over here the carrot and the stick is quite strong of what's at stake, and again, what's emphasizing is that this is at stake, not just the obvious that Bnei Nida is Rahman al-Islam could be a big gam, but even this is just the extra things that are there to prevent, and all the gedorim that the Chachamim then set up are all nichlal in having the effect on our children. And of course, in this, we want to be mahader betachlis. There's a well-known line of Rabbi Paracher that Rabbi Paracher used to get some flack from fellow Chassidim for being fromak, for being a little too intense about halachas and chumras, things that wasn't the level of chumras, was not the level that Chassidim kocht in. Kocht more in pnimius, and so he used to give him a hard time. So he justified himself and he said, Gloib mir, believe me that all of my chumras that I'm doing in halacha are just for the sake that I should be more refined. So anyway, so in Taharas Hamishpacha, this is obviously negayah to us also, that this helps us in our avodah pnimis, but this is also negayah to our children, at the effect of the chinuch, like the Medrash says, that we're zoiche to have children like Bnei Aaron through even the Zehirus in Taharas Hamishpacha. Okay. We'll get into a little bit later also. We have a challenge over here. Challenge is we can focus just on the halachis, which are basically as we learned it and as we possibly reviewed it. But ein beis hamedrash b'lei chiddush. Everybody wants a little chiddush. When we're going into the areas of chiddushim, so here we have, on the one hand, we want to learn some chiddushim because we want to be more informed than we were already, so that we know a little bit more what to look out for, and at the same time, we don't want to, jump and make assumptions in some of these areas of chidushim and make assumptions that this is taked halacha. So if anything I say is a little bit chidushtik and it's not so clear, whatever. So first of all, I may say something that maybe not in line with the one way you heard. We'll have time to clarify. So I'm just saying, give me that opportunity to clarify and not to make a maskana based on something that maybe sounds a little bit of a dvar chiddush, and draw conclusions from there. Draw further conclusion. Okay. Okay. So to start is, how does a woman become tamei? So we're not in chassan classes now, so we're all well familiar of many different ways. But I'll just summarize them as, there can be, possibly you can frame it as 7-8 causes that can cause a woman to become tamei. One is her natural cycle. That's the most obvious. Another one is, we have the halacha that we learned that even hargasha, in principle, that even though you didn't see anything come out, the hargasha could also be a problem. Today, we don't assume that women are baki in hargashas, and there are many times that it could get confused with something else. So therefore, some are saying that we should make a woman who has hargasha should make some chazaka, that these hargashas are nothing. Some hold like that. But anyway, this hargasha is mainly negeya halacha l'maisa for when it accompanies something else, not as a standalone thing that usually is not a cause for tumah, but when it accompanies something else, it could make it more severe, raise the level of attention to possible shaila d'oraisa, and so on. Okay. Then there is any bedika that's done, and we have some spotting on it. So even though this may not be a flow, but we'll call it, for distinction, we'll call it a mara, as opposed to a re'iyah. It's just something that you see on the cloth. But halachically, we consider it a re'iyah. And why? This is based on the principle of hargasha, because with a bedika, there could possibly be hargasha that you don't know what you felt because something is moving over there in that area. So this is a stronger chashash of a masked hargasha, and therefore, la'alacha, we treat it like a re'iyah, which means that it goes on the calendar. I know there was supposed to be a shiur on calendar. I don't know if that will play out. Of course, I assume today everybody's also using the app, which makes things a lot simpler. But it's still good to learn some things that are not necessarily addressed in the app. But that's a separate discussion. Anyway, but just that a mara is going to be put on the calendar in almost all cases. There can be a couple of exceptions that it doesn't get put as an additional thing, but in many cases it does. Okay. Then there's a kinuach, or I should say before, there's a kesem. There's a kesem, which is that there's spotting, which is without a hargasha, and it's not migufa, and therefore we wouldn't normally apply the dinim d'oraisa, but chachamim were machmir, not the place now to go into the reasons for their gzeira, but they were machmir, but because it's only a chumrah of chachamim, so fits actually only the Chumrah of Chachamim and there's no Chash Deiraisa, so then it has many leniencies, which we'll discuss in more detail soon. There is then something which is in between, where especially according to the Alter Rebbe's Shita, there's some suffix about, which is a kinuach. A kinuach, we're not sure, 100% sure, if according to the Alter Rebbe, it should be judged as a kesem with its kulas, or it should be judged as a bedika, as a mara, with its chumras. Okay. Then the next category, the sixth category, is ein psichas hakever beloy dam, that just with an opening, even if you saw no dam, we're going to assume an opening means the opening of the cervix. So if there's an opening of the cervix, that's counted as a psichas harechem. Some notable exceptions would be that there's as a woman gets older and has more pregnancies, there could be a constant state of psichas harechem, because all the shiurim that you discuss with Harav is 4 millimeters. Yeah. So anyways, there's different shiurim that are being discussed, and so it's worth noting that there are exceptions to this. There can be, and definitely during the time of pregnancy, even more so, when there's more pressure on the cervix, on the pelvic floor, on the cervix. So there are times that we don't follow the principles of psichas harechem, but there are many times that we do. So by childbirth itself, there will be a psichas harechem. We'll discuss it in more detail. A miscarriage, there will be a psichas harechem. Often there's dam as well. And then there's also medical. The most significant one is the medical procedures, that some of them don't have dam, and you're not necessarily mechuyev to look for dam if you had a medical procedure. So let's say even if there was dam, you would be able to not see it, but still the medical procedure itself caused a psichas harechem. There's also certain medical procedures that women are doing after later in life that are also can cause a need to go to the mikveh even when re'iyos are no longer happening. Okay, so that's number 6. Then there could be something that affects a woman very strongly. We have the famous Gemara in Megillah that says about Esther Hamalka, that Batis Chalchal Hamalka, that Esther got with a certain kind of fear. She got actually something which caused, and this is like similar to Hargasha. Basically, when a woman goes through something, this is maybe something to look at, to discuss with her Rav, if possibly this could be like a Hargasha, that you have to be choishish or something, even if it was only a stain, even if there wasn't a regular Hargasha, whatever. But that's another oifen. And the final one is, we know there's something that we're always warned, is never to decide for yourself that the wife especially, but it's possibly also negate to the husband, to decide that, this is no good, because there's the idea of you can be oiser for yourself. You can be oiser for yourself. The woman certainly can be asering herself. So not to, whenever we have a shaila, not to make any conclusion, certainly not b'dibur, that, it's probably Nida, probably Tuma, something like that. Okay, fine. So these are the general rules of how you become Tamid. But now let's go. We'll start first with Ksamim. We'll talk about some of the kulas by Ksamim. And then I will go over to talk a little bit about bedikais, about different factors in bedikais. I want to mention there was mentioned that there would be another shir for those who sign up. Anybody who's here, even if you didn't sign up, you could still sign up, and there will be a shir that will be much more intricate about bedikais, about different things that a Rav wants to know, that a Rav is looking for, that some things that you can yourself then figure out that maybe at this point you haven't yet been able to conclude a little bit. Okay, so we'll still talk about some inyanim of bedika. So what are the obvious kulas, the known kulas with regards to a kesem? Is it better for anybody over there if I stand up? So it's fine. What? Fine sitting? Yeah? Okay. What are the notable kulas for a kesem? So always we make a big deal of three. There's three original rules, but there's also some more. One is that size, as opposed to amara, size on a kesem matters. So you can automatically dismiss some things based on size, but size, it's important to point out, it's not always so clear. There are different shittas. What is the size? It's good to know about the importance of asking a Lubavitcher Rav. I had this experience one time a few years ago on Erev Shabbos, and it was so close to Shabbos, I had to go to the Litvisher Reish Koilel over here, Rabbi Shiner, and anyway, his answer had me very confused. From the little bit that I learned, something didn't match, and I basically realized something was a little bit off. And so afterwards, I went back to discuss with him. I ended up not relying on the psak because I felt something was amiss. Then afterwards, I went back and I asked, and I said, "Right, you know I'm a Lubavitcher, right? I didn't mention then because it was in the Bahal of Erev Shabbos, but you know that the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, Reb Chaim no speaks about it. Whatever, some known poskim, we have a smaller shear." He said, "No, I didn't know. But anyway, and this was definitely very negeya to the shaila. So, what exactly that size is? So, classically, we say, according to the Alter Rebbe, typically we say that it's the size of a dime, and others are saying, the Litvishe are making that it's the size of a penny. We don't have that in Canada anymore, but the U.S. penny is a little larger than a dime, and others are saying even the size of a nickel. So, according to the Alter Rebbe, it's the size of a dime. So, again, this is one of the reasons why one of the areas where we have a certain chumrah that the Welt doesn't have. Also, the Psich Kever is also an area of chumrah, the shailas that we mentioned before. So, anyway, so number one, the size, and even amongst Lubavitcher Rabbanim, could be a little bit debated. So it's certainly not a shaila for an amateur, and also then the shapes that these things go in, and then what connects to how do you connect different separations, and what if you have two layers in the garment and whatever, and there can be a lot of factors in being mitzaref or figuring out a chiddush of how to not be mitzaref. So anyway, so these are all things. This is, again, while we know the idea of size, but this idea of not necessarily just going based on the size, still asking the shaila. Besides for other factors, like I said, there's always some additional factors that maybe this is not stama kesem, maybe there's a reason to be choishish, even if it's small, to be choishish or something else. The other one is the color, right? The second of the three kulas is the color. So the color is that only if it's on white. Generally, we understand that Chachamim were saying that if it's not on white, then we can't tell the color accurately, especially when with regards to colors, min haTorah, there's only 4 shades of red, right? Not every kind of red. We have to be machmer because we're not baki every shade of red. But min haTorah was only 4 shades of red. So therefore, any color we would assume would at least affect the shade of red. So even though you see that it's red, but you don't know which red you're seeing. Now, even though today we're machmir, but we still have the kula that Chachamim gave. Again, this whole kesem is only midrabanan, and Chachamim said anytime it's a color, we don't have to be choishish because we've messed with the authentic color. So So just a note, a practical note, is that with regards to some soft whites, or off-whites is not necessarily so simple, and there's a lot of, women's undergarments that can come in different kind of off-whites. That's not so pashut that automatically gets the exemption, because there's we look at white like this, and we assume that this is a davar pashut, but really this is a color which is through bleach and through other things that they didn't have back then. So when Chachamim said white, it didn't necessarily have to be white like this, right? And this is not white, but this has some white, right? So and there's it's different. So something to be aware of.
It's easier to see pashut on white. It's easier to see on white. The brightness, the whiteness compared to, especially easier to see the coloring.
Yes, obviously a very bright white is easier to see the color, but I'm saying is that you don't get the leniency necessarily with a slight off, with what we'll call an off-white, just right. Anything that's off, if it has a definitive other color, yes, but if it's an off-white, it's a little grayish, a little beigeish, a little this, a little. Not necessarily. It could still be possibly categorized as white. There's something to be mindful of. Mention here that the colored garments is of course something that we rely on a lot, not just b'di'evid, we rely on it l'chatchila. The Ramah follows, whose opinion we follows the Rambam, who says that Chachamim, not just they allowed, as the Beis Yosef says, not just they allowed that the woman can wear colored b'imei Taharasa, so that she shouldn't become tamei, but the way that Ramah writes it is that they encouraged it. This is the eitzah that's given to a woman. Chachamim want her to stay tahar, and they don't want to find the problem that they created with their gzeira. So they've given advice that a woman should wear this color b'imei Taharasa. There is some question with regards to the extent of this advice. When you talk about very dark colors, there it's not necessary. It's not suggested, because that covers too much. It takes away things that we should be seeing. If it's just to make a typical kesem, a typical spotting covered over, that's fine. That's what Chachamim had in mind. But it's so dark that it would maybe make you miss something greater, something bigger. This can be a problem. And also, obviously, in Shiva Nikiyim, as we'll talk soon, then we definitely do not, under normal circumstances, want colors. This would be a major kula, a major chiddush, that a Rav may advise a very specific woman in a very specific circumstance to not wear white in the Shiva Nikiyim to prevent problems. Okay. And the third one is that it has to be a davar makabel tuma. Right? If it's also the explanation of why, but I guess we can't go too much into explanations. Only a davar makabel tuma. As a general principle, we know that karka and mechuber karka, for example, is not a davar makabel tuma. So you find a spotting on karka or on mechuber karka. So it could be the shower tiles, or it could be whatever, and the different things, that this is not considered a davar makabel tuma. There is great debate with regards to davar makabel tuma, with regards to panty liners and things like that, and those are in general not advised. When you need one, you need one, but in general, it's not advised that one should try to use that as a way. Even if you're going to follow the opinion that it's not makabel tuma, you shouldn't use it as a way to avoid it, because it has other complications similar to the dark black. It will hide and mess up the way you're seeing other things that should be judged differently. Worth noting, however, that let's say one of the common examples of a davar makabel tuma, and here we'll see the idea of where you can't just look at it as a kesem. One of the let's say, classic places that you would expect on a davar hamechuber lekarka, that now you have the heter, you don't have to be concerned about a kesim, would be the toilet bowl. Right? That could be like, otherwise, where are you finding stam ksamim? Ksamim is always going to be found on the intimate wear whenever you're wearing it. So where are you going to? That's where it's going to be found. So what do we say then? L'chayda, it's a good heter. Oh, but here's always a concern, and this plays into the concern that comes up with the kinuach. There's always a concern over there that there was hargosha. There's always another factor that you have to discuss with a Rav. There's a concern that whenever there was just like the kinuach was because of a physical pressure, was something that could have been goyim a sensation, so too, using the bathroom itself is also something that could have caused and covered a sensation. And therefore, lav dafka, you get to just automatically dismiss it as, but I saw it only in a davar, it's not makabel tuma. Right, and whatever, there's other factors also. If as you see it, yoytze megufa, if you're able to really see it before, there's other factors that it's not always. So anyway, this is just emphasizing while we're learning the rules, we're also learning what we still have to ask about, and still has many other factors that don't necessarily automatically fall into just one factor. One factor laheter there could be a factor lahachmir, but even when you see a factor lahachmir, there can be other factors lahakil. Okay. We know there's a chiddush also of the Alter Rebbe with regards to the color black. That the color black, the Alter Rebbe says that there we don't have, we can't rely on size, on this, if it's less than the shear of a dime, we can't rely on that. So as opposed to the advice that if it's black, therefore there's no shaila. I remember, actually, I'll say a story. When I came to town, I had a certain shaila about something, and this is achrei mois. I'm going to get to Rabbi Shachat. So one of the elder anash in the community told me, he says, look, Rabbi Shachat, he's not, with all due respect, he's not following the Piskei Dinim of the Alter Rebbe. And he tells me a story that happened with him. He says, there was a shaila with regards to black, and the Rav said that it's fine because it's less than the shear. And the Alter Rebbe doesn't hold this. The Alter Rebbe doesn't hold it. You have the heter of the shear with regard to black because he says it's shrunken, it's dried up, so you can't go with the shear. Anyway, so this, I don't know if he likes it to be publicized in his name, but I think the cat is out of the bag. Rabbi Shachat's brother, Rabbi Elisha Tzugazont, he once asked the Rebbe a question with regards to Rabbanei Anash that are not following the Psak Din of Rabbi Seinu Nesienu. And he was wondering, what should people make of it? What should people make of it? Should people just assume that, the Rav, you can't follow the Rav in this case because it's Toya B'dvar Mishnah, right? Piskei Rabbi Seinu Nesienu is like absolute. Toya B'dvar Mishnah Lo'ilam Chayzer. Or do you say that the Rav has his cheshbonus? Anyways, the famous mind of the Rebbe that the Ziknei Rabbanei Anash certainly know what it says in Divrei Rabbi Seinu Nesienu, and yet they had reasons for deciding differently. Anyway, so there's just an interesting note with regards to the color black. And there's a lot of times that black is not black; it's really brown. Anyway, so it's always good not to just automatically assume a chumrah, not to automatically assume a kula. Just another indicator. Okay. While these are the three big ones, but there's also a factor that's negeya to bedikos also, but it's a big factor with regards to ksamim, and that is tiliyah. Looking for, could it possibly have come anywhere else? So here's the big difference between a kesem and a bedika. By a bedika, if we're, let's say, looking to say that, who knows, maybe this is really not dam, maybe this is really makeup, or this is dam, but it's a dam makkah, and or whatever else that we're looking to say, this is came from shaving or whatever. By a kesem, a tliya is almost an automatic heter, right? Like we don't need to confirm it. We just need to be able to verenferzich. It has to be reasonable, but we can verenferen. If you could verenfer that if there's a tliya, again, it's not so good to decide this klal automatically, but because there could be different factors. But generally, that's the approach with a kesem. When you could confirm that just a kesem, a tliya doesn't have to be confirmed, it just has to be a possibility. Masha'en kain ba'ya bedika, there are also indeed tliyas, there are times that we're able to say that it came from something else. But let's say this is what we know that now is a popular in-demand thing, often is a bedekis. A bedekis, to confirm about a bedika, to confirm that if a bedika comes out with a certain look of blood that doesn't look to be the regular, so the Rav takes it and the Rav says, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like it's very likely coming from some makkah. So then the bedekis is able to confirm it. So by a bedika you have to confirm it. You have to confirm it 100%. And by a kesem, it just has to be a reasonable, what do you call it in English? Plausible deniability. Plausible deniability, that's the way it works by a kesem. Okay. So the next, assuming now that we're talking about already, now we know that the woman is tamei, what would be the next step? We have to figure out what is the process of becoming tahor. So we know that there's 7 clean days, but there's 5 days that precede it. The 5 days that precede it are irregardless of whether it's a 5-day minimum. That means regardless of whether she's seeing dam or not, there's almost always 5 days with very, very few exceptions, almost always. But when is this 5-day minimum? This 5-day minimum is only if she was tahor. The general rule is only if she was tahor on the day before. The minhag Ashkenazim is, as the Ramah writes, a very, very strong lashon, because after the Ramah explains the reason for everything, a person might have the reason for this 5 days when you're not seeing, right? Practically, we know that we're seeing very often for longer than 5 days, a regular iyah. But when something comes out of the blue, it's just a kesem, and it's not, so a kesem still, even though it's the Rabbanan, it still has 5 days. And when you do the math, it seems like a little bit of a stretch, and why is it so necessary? So the Ramah writes a very strong lashon, poidet geder yishachenu nachash, that we'll leave it in the Ramah's lashon, no need to translate. So it's considered something very, very strong, and we know that there were different pushes. A letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe with different pushes to be makel in this, especially when it comes to this issue of that is now been called halachic infertility. So a lot of people want to be makel, because if we're going to demand this 5 days always, and the woman maybe has a way of shortening her iyas with different medications and herbs and stuff. So it would be a big taiva if we can advance it a little bit. And anyway, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote that the doctors not to rely on the doctors, but I'm saying for all these reasons, the Ramah comes down very, very strong. He bavar in this, and he writes, however, there are definitely cases, what's talking about halachic infertility, this problem. I once heard that there was, whatever, there was a Rav who had in his community, in his broader community, he had 25 couples that were dealing with halachic infertility, and they thought, okay, this is their sentence, al pi Torah, that al pi Torah, just they're not going to have children, at least by the natural ways, not getting into how you can do it in other ways, and with insemination or so on. But the Rav said that he started encouraging all these people. You got to talk to a Rav. You got to talk to a Rav. Yeah, so it wasn't a Rav. It was somebody from one of these organizations, Tarenu and this and that, and what are the others? Somebody from one of these organizations. He told him, says, you got to start speaking to a Rav. Maybe you're overdoing it. Maybe you're overcounting. He said 16 out of the 25 gave birth naturally after talking to a Rav. They were overdoing it. They were assuming that the Re'iyah was going a lot longer than necessary. Right? So this is a good thing to note about that. Not to overdo it, but also not to compromise on it. Okay. Oh, sorry. One more thing I just missed with regard. I want to point out another distinction between ksamim and re'iyas. Is the fact that one is the Iraisa and one is the Rabbanon. Another big factor will be benegeya to a suffix. A suffix, there are some sfeikas that happen after the Rav sees it, and the Rav still has some sfeikas that's for the Rav to figure out. There are sometimes a suffix that arises when the Rav never got a chance to see it. For example, a lost bedika. It happens. We have to try to prevent it from happening. A lost bedika, something that got flushed, right? A kinuach shaila is very often kinuach. I saw it and I flushed and I didn't even realize, and now I'm realizing it was something. It was a problem. So again, here that we apply that. It's important to discuss with the Rav whether you can apply their principles of Safek Derabanan Lakula, or if you have to apply their principles of Sveika Deiraisa Lachumra. There could be a lot of factors in discussing what did you see, how did you see, how sure are you of what you saw, did you not see at all, what lighting was in the bathroom that you saw, what paint was the paint of the bathroom, what paint is the paint of the bathroom, because this affects how the lighting actually shows, and so on. There could be many shilas in this regard, but again, it's one of the fundamental principles is going to be Sveika Dairaisa or Sveika Darabanan, and how you look at it. Okay. Fine. So after the 5 days, the most important, never to be compromised bedika that's necessary is a hefsek tara. A hefsek tara is very strict. It has what seems to be a leniency in how we prepare for it, a leniency that we don't, something that would be considered a leniency or a problem for any other bedika in the Shiva Nikiyim, and that is that Yudafke are told to wash the area before. By the hefsek tara, Yudafke is supposed to do that. A hefsek tara is supposed to be done at a specific time. It's supposed to specifically be done samuch l'shkia. How samuch l'shkia is practically interpreted is generally, I saw some people say dafka 20 minutes. I think that's a little bit tight. Most people are saying a half hour. That's the lechatchila. That's the lechatchila. Now, just to note, because she dafka has to wash, so it takes time to wash, and then it takes time to test and to see if the washing was good. We know that if it's going to be a minute after shkia, it's going to be already a problem. If it's mamish 1 minute after shkia, it's worth talking to a Rav. If it's within 5 minutes, 6 minutes of what you think is after shkia, maybe your clock is also wrong, so maybe even 10 minutes to talk to a Rav. Maybe it could count by some more detailed cheshbon. But generally it has to be before. It has to be before. So therefore, you don't want to push it too much. So generally, a half hour is considered the time. So on a regular weekday, the recommended practice is that a woman washes herself completely. On a Shabbos, Yom Tif, Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, Shiva, whatever it is, and normally you're not washing, still washing at least that Bein Ragleha before, in advance of the Hefsek Tara. Okay, so that I spoke about what the ideal shear. What about what's the more b'di'evet shear? The ideal shear is that it should be within a half hour. So generally, there are many who also allow for an hour, and an hour is accepted by many as very lechatchila, or we'll call it plaga mincha, which is 72 minutes before shkia, 72 halachic minutes. So generally saying an hour. What's clear according to all poskim is that if one did it, because they were concerned, because the timing worked, if one did it within mincha ktana, which is 2.5 hours before shkia, then you could say there's no need to redo it. However, if you did it before mincha ktana, b'di'eved, it can be relied upon. But lechatchila, it should not be relied upon. Lechatchila, we should do another one. So women are advised to do one earlier as soon as they know the bleeding stopped, to do one earlier because they don't want to miss the hefsek tara, and then their Shiva Nikiyim can only start a day later. But lechatchila to still do another one, samuch l'shkia, again at least within the last 2.5 hours of the day.
Shas Chag could be lechatchila also? Like if someone's taking a flight and they need to do it, let's say 4 hours before just because they're traveling or something.
Yeah, so there's a general rule that we say Shas Chag k'di'evet domni. So you won't be able to, so you can rely on that. Yeah. Then there's a moich dachuk. Moich dachuk is something which is good to have clarification. It's not always easy to have the clarity yourself. There are different halachas about how required is it lechatchila and b'di'evet. The moich dachuk, why am I saying not just, obviously one wants to go lechatchila, many women end up having problems from the moich dachuk because it sits there for a while, and many women are very sensitive, and so they're likely to get some sort of abrasion, some sort of a scratch as a result of the moich dachuk that is going to be a problem. So there's a line by the Aruch HaShulchan. It says in Shulchan Aruch, it says with regard to most cases of moich dachuk that it's l'mitzvah min hamuvchar. So the Aruch HaShulchan says that Shulchan Aruch was madgish this to tell you it's only mitzvah min hamuvchar. I tell you not always to do it. So it's good to discuss with the Rav. If there is difficulty doing it, there are still times that it's mamish necessary, but a woman who has difficulty doing it, it's worth discussing with the Rav when it won't be necessary to do. Right, and when it's recommended not to do it because we're not looking to create problems that we could have avoided. Okay. Shiva Nikiyim. Shiva Nikiyim is so starting the day after. We need a lechatchila. What we're supposed to do is twice a day to do a bedika. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. We know that the Zohar says that this Safra Allah Shivas Yomim is very similar to what we're doing with Svartim Lachem. That's not just the Zohar that says this. Also, Taisus is saying. Taisus is asking a question: why a woman is not making a bracha? Why is a woman not making a bracha when she's doing the Shiva Nikiyim? V'Safra Allah, like a bracha Sfiras HaImer, so she has a mitzvah say V'Safra Allah. Right. So from Taisus' question, some bring it as a mocker kadum to what the Shalah says. The Shalah says that the woman should count bedibur, just like Usfartam Lachem is bedibur, so too V'Safra Allah. while it's from what I've gathered, it's not the common minhag to follow the shalah and to actually say it b'dibur. It's certainly something that one should be conscious about. That's negei lahalacha, to be generally conscious of the count and not to assume that the count was nispatel. Somebody assumes the count is nispatel. It can affect whether the count can continue or whether they have to restart. So there's an important consciousness that's negeya. And also we see over here just how important it is. And why I'm emphasizing that is because if we go to b'di'evid, you can say that b'di'evid, first day, one bedika, seventh day, one bedika, b'di'evid is good. Right? So therefore, this is an area that many people, especially after one time that a Rav told them for a specific reason to follow the b'di'evid, so afterwards they could get a little bit used to making the b'di'evid the normal. Missing a day of the b'dika. So I'm emphasizing, Taisus is saying that there's a shot, maybe we should have really made a bracha. So he's answering why not, but it's every day is a special thing. Every day is a special hachana. Again, the Shalah is explaining it more al pi pnimius, and how it's like you said, it's connected to just like this usfartem lachem is the sheva midas and this and that, and every day is basically a tikkun of another level, and every bedika, and it's dafka twice a day, and it's dafka by day. There's very specific halachas because it's a real usfartem lachem, so it's dafka by day, and that's why the twice a day bedikas have to be done dafka during the daytime hours, shivas yamim. Right? So dafka during the daytime hours, not during the night hours. So we do the morning one dafka after nates. The morning one should be dafka after nates in the morning, and the second one should be dafka before shkia. So emphasizing the importance of seeing the lechatchila way as really, really, really significant, even though there could be cases where one is relying on the b'di'evid and doing one a day again, and there's many matzavim that the Rabbi will recommend. The first thing the Rabbi will recommend for a woman who has different difficulties is maybe do once every day, and sometimes even to go to the extent of just doing less than once a day. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a time restriction with the morning and the afternoon bedika?
Is there
any time restriction with the morning and the afternoon bedika?
By the way, I see we're doing better with time, so for more engagement, if anybody has questions, I was nervous that we wouldn't make it in time. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying, like for after nates until Wednesdays, or does it have to be, is there more of a restriction than that?
You're saying not to do it too late?
Yeah.
Lechatchila.
Like the Haftarah, where it's somewhat the Shkia of the afternoon.
That's not as important. No, it's not as important, but it's a lechatchila. Yeah. Okay. Be'ez Hashem, next week Rabbi Vidal will be discussing the what?
My shoe on next week.
Oh, sorry, right. So it's in a few weeks. Rabbi Vidal will be discussing what happened after the Shiva Nikiyim on the last day of the Shiva Nikiyim, the Chafifa and the Tefillah. We'll be discussing that as Hashem in depth in his shir. Okay. Actually, I heard a story, just speaking about the Shiva Nikiyim, I heard a story that there was a woman who got a minor from the Rebbe with regards to Zehirus and Taharas Hamishpacha as a bracha for having children. And we know different stories. At times that it was one issue of harchakais. That will be next week's shir. It was a small thing of harchakais that happened in between. In other words, there was a tefillah ksheira. The poil was no nida. It was a zehirus in the time of Tumah. And I heard another story that it turned out that basically this was the one thing that she was missing, was that she was often skipped days of b'dikas. Right? And this ended up being the tziner for her bracha. How do you understand these stories? B'chlal, if it's a tziner for an extra special bracha, or this caused the mania, go to the Rebbe Sikha about mezuzah and how it plays out over here. But anyway, but you just see the significance. If that can be something that was that significant that ended up being the tziner, again you see the significance of following the lechatchila dika oifen. And certainly, like I said, it says befeidish in places about that following all the details of the halachas, b'mei tumasa, and in the lead up of the Tahara. This is all, we think of the bikr is that it shouldn't be a child of b'nei Nida, and kedushas avi ve'imay b'shas tashmish. This is bikr what's going to affect. But it says all these hidurim that were being meticulous in the halachas and all the hachana, this is also affecting the child. And a famous letter of the Rebbe says that it can do l'mafreya also. If you feel that there's any pagam, that maybe because at the time you weren't careful enough in these halachas, so now fixing it, studying the halachas again, and committing yourself to a higher standard of halacha, so tshuva helps l'mafreya, and it could take away any pagam that was what? That was previously done, right? So that was encouraging. It was a famous letter where somebody said their child was interested in a goy, and the Rebbe says that one of the things that can cause this is the lack of carefulness in Taharas Hamishpacha. So you have this attachment to Be'ilas Isur. And the Rebbe said, if you'll now take on Taharas Hamishpacha, you can take out this nature that was then ingrained in him. The child was interested. What? The child was interested in a goy, and the parents were devastated. The Rebbe told them to take a stronger level of Taharas Mishpacha. This will fix the mafreya. Okay. A little bit more about pedikos. So whenever there's a shaila comes up about a bedika, or the question is what is a shaila? So, like I said, a rav often can be dismissing even a suffix. He can dismiss a suffix just to show you how much this plays a factor. Somebody can tell him, "I think I saw red." A woman can say, "I think I saw red." And the Rav asks a few questions about where you saw the red, and the Rav can throw it out. And the Rav can dismiss it because he said, you have no idea what you're seeing. Right? He can dismiss a serious shaila. The shaila is lost. He doesn't know what the color is. He's just saying she saw some reddish, and the halacha is that any red we need to be concerned about. But because of where you're seeing it, dismiss. So it's very important to, before determining whether, even the question of whether something is a shaila or not, to at least try to give it the best look in that will reveal the most to us, keep us the most informed. So if bathrooms, often they have yellowish lighting are generally going to make a much stronger red glare, generally speaking, right? White lightings, very white, which some people who want to see every speck of dirt in their bathroom to make sure it stays clean that's more likely to have the opposite effect. It's more likely to have the opposite effect, to make something that is problematic. And that's just a general rule. And like I said, in like the painting of the walls, so this is, the best way, if you're not making a conclusive determination, the best way is to either look at it outside yourself, or at least take it to the open window when the sun is not pouring in, and at least then you see the best picture, and you're not going to miss something. There are things that are very small, and that are easy to miss. So it's just good to figure out, to do a little bit of a chakira drisha yourself, to make sure that that at least a shaila is not being missed. And in some cases, again, when a person is more advanced and more experienced, and with consultation with the Rav, you can already figure out yourself, okay, this thing is not a shaila, but that should be with more guidance, to make sure that you're understanding all the factors and all the things to look for. Okay. Thank you. About a Rav, so this is an interesting thing. We're here at a men's Taharas Hamishpacha shir, and people sometimes ask, what's better? Who the better should communicate with the Rav? Now, again, couples over here are married, and you already have your comfort zone and what you figured out. Some people feel that it's better mitzad tznius and mitzad the shame that maybe a woman feels. It's better that a man ask the shailas. In most cases, it seems that that's not. If that's what works for you, that's what works for you. But I would say that that's not initially the best recommended practice, for a few reasons. First of all, there's the issue of broken tape recorder, right? Because there's one who actually knows the Metzias and one who doesn't. You don't necessarily even understand how to ask the question, never mind how to give over the answer, and so on. Besides for that, if there is an issue of discomfort, that issue of discomfort of communication is not necessarily more comfortable to communicate in full detail to the husband. No, then it's not natural that you're going to do that. So you're going to end up giving half the information. If you're calling directly to the Rav is right away going to ask all the questions, right away going, and everything this is a professional conversation. You understand, he knows what he's looking for. He's not, it's not stam sharing. It's not, everything is. So I would say that in general, there's a preference for that. But of course, everybody's got to do what works. But when you're working in between, it's very important to understand yourself a little bit better. Inside the Metzias, inside the Halacha, so you understand what to communicate. Right? This is always a mashal and chassidus that the best one to give over a message is dafke the ish pashat. Right? The ish pashat, he doesn't mix in his seichel. So either you know nothing and you just deliver a message exactly. You're knowing a little bit and not understanding enough, we sometimes end up manipulating the message across messaging, and it's just... Now, another thing about that. So, l'chayda, the Rav, he has the responsibility to think about all the factors, and he should be able to figure it out. But the reality is that you figure out factors much faster when information was readily presented. Right? When information was readily presented, with all the information was laid on the table, the factors are able to think. Right? Even AI only thinks about what you ask. Right? And AI is considered in some ways a bigger genius now. Not as intuitive, but there's a limit to what is your scope of thinking and what kind of solution and what kind of questions you're thinking to ask at the time, and you end up entering, so to say, a certain frame of thinking. And I saw in some svarim is also recommending that if you have, let's say, a very small shaila, if you have something, it's a speck, so point it out, because the Rav is human. The Rav could be that'll look at it and will not see it. You saw it. You looked at it more meticulously. Now, some people say that's a shayla of the Rav. What do you mean you didn't see it? And taka, as when you're looking at shaylas, you're told if you don't see anything, you got to really, really look. In other words, and if you think any shayla is easily dismissed, the person who submitted it, not necessarily, don't make the assumption that they didn't know. Maybe they really knew. And they were looking about something, and you have to look for something a little bit more closely. But the general recommendation is to give the information as much as possible. It will get you, especially, and the communications back and forth also take time, and sometimes so it's just making everybody's life easier and reaching much more of the the accurate and all available, let's say all available factors of kulis, and sometimes also a necessary factor of a chumrah, more often the factors of kulis, that you can think of how to be metayr l'bayla. Okay. Just with also a little, just a general sikum, then today many people have issues with doctors. So I was doubting whether this is a good mashal. Today there's a lot of mistrust when it comes to doctors. But assuming in a normal circumstance, right, everybody understands that when you're going to a doctor, it's important to go to a doctor and not to be mekel or machmir without going to a doctor. Meaning, you don't self-medicate because you think that something's wrong, right? And you don't ignore symptoms because you think nothing's wrong, right? Both. Now, you're not going to just go with the symptoms that you know, and you whatever, you have experience here, and last time you were there, and yet that's not generally going to be the best advice. And over here, when we're talking about, in some cases, it's mamish. It's like we'll call it. It's a fatal problem. It's if you're talking about the Isser Kares. Even if you're talking about lechatchila chumras, lechatchila is, like we said, all this is negeya to strengthening shalom bayis, and all of this is bederach segula, and this is negeya to our children. So we don't want to be mekil. We don't want to be machmer. This is another word because with the parsha, the problem of Nadav and Avihu was also that that they didn't have wives. Right? This we learn. A Kohen Gadol has to have a wife. A Kohen Gadol has to not be with his wife for a week before, right? But there has to be a time. There has to be a time like this. And both of them, and Chas v'Shalom, the severe punishment that we spoke about can also be for going in without a wife, right? So to say, for being machmir on a couple not being together for another day and saying, we can handle it, and we're bali nefesh and whatever, and it's just not worth it. We're not that interested anyway, or whatever your reasons are. It's certainly not the way to go. So it's worth for that reason, really making sure to speak to a Rav. Like I said, from a Rav's side, the Rebbe always said that doctors, it's not their job to say you have no hope. It's never the job of doctors. The job of doctors is always to figure out a solution. Similar thing, the Rav's job is never just to look and say, to be machmir. His job is always 100% to be mekel, and yet at the same time, just like it's never a doctor's, it's never in the doctor's best interest to be overly mekel. In other words, the doctor who's going to tell you have no concerns, you're fine, right? Don't be afraid. Just like the doctor shouldn't make you afraid for your life and say that's it. He shouldn't. So again, the Rav's job is to also guide the couple when they should be a little bit more machmir, and so many of these factors the Rav really needs to know what's going on, and so many questions are so different. One of the reasons why I felt the need to do this was, sometimes somebody would ask me a question, and because I couldn't answer, so you just, okay, I'll send them to a Rav. And I realized the Rav doesn't understand what's going on. The Rav knows his family. The Rav understands what their level of shalom bayis is, what their level of Hamishpacha is, what the general mental, emotional state, what are the sensitivities, what are this. There's so many shilas that, especially in Chai issues, that are so multi-layered, right? And negate to so many things. So it's really, really good that one should trust the Rav with sharing as many details, and naturally, having a Rav who's more in tune to the details. There are things that even you don't have to say, and he already has it figured out, and he knows which way he has to be noita, lahakil or lahachmir, again, as appropriate as necessary according to halacha. Anyway, l'chaim, shkoyach for all coming, and I guess we'll daven maidav, maybe whatever we have some time for questions, and time for questions after maidav.
Whoever won the book that was advertised now will be for $25 didn't come yet. If you want to for sure have one, please write your name down. If you want to prepay, you could do that as well.